have you ever had something like, let's say, in the middle of an Icaro, an entity appear, something that you didn't expect in the middle of an Icaro that maybe caught you off guard or something like that, or you felt that you had to address in the middle of an Icaro? Do you catch what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that actually happens all the time. Um,
So is it
entities
very
are
imperative to stick with the Icaro, not like deviate from it, or does the Icaro change in the middle of it based upon what's happening?
oh, it can change. Yeah, it can definitely change. Like, so if you're in a, first of all, I think entities are kind of like encoded energies in our consciousness. So, you know, somehow they're like part of the field at that time. And there's a lot of mythology around them, and I don't really like vibe or resonate with a lot of the mythology that's about. Like I say, a lot of the mythology seems very like Hollywood-esque around this. And I actually think this is way more common than people think. Like I was just on an airplane recently and there was a cartoon movie, and the cartoon movie was way sketchier than seeing entities in an ayahuasca ceremony. Like way
Wow.
sketchier. These 3D rendered, computer graphic, AI driven stories, like broadcasting all the same message into 200 people on an airplane, all at the same time with like 30 lined up scenes, showing everybody images of things that could possibly never happen in nature, just going straight into everyone's mind and everyone just nodding their head, like all laughing at the same time, all in exactly the same collective trance with that thing. Those things to me are entities that are on the screen. Those are computer generated entities. They're there, they're pixelated, and they're coming at you, and you can't get away from them unless you close your eyes, and they're telling you a story, and the story is somehow making sense to you, even though there's literally nothing factual that could possibly be about it. And and so I think people have the idea of entities literally all wrong. I think when you go into a forest and you see all the plants, those are all entities. They're an energetic form that has been created here over billions of years that we barely understand, and we just call plants, and we barely have any idea what's going on with them. So, you know, people want to think that the entity is like a gnome that walks out of the plant and comes and talks to you like with a little pointed hat on and like little curly hair and stuff. And the plant itself to me is the entity, not whether you see a gnome or not. And so, you know, when you're in this field, the field is going back to your immediate question on entities, the field takes on shape and form. And the field is this incredible geometry of fractals. It's not empty space, or it's filled with prana. It's like spongy. And in it, the energy can start to take on shape and form, right? And in the nature of that shape and form, portals can open and spirals, and you can look through them and it looks like you're looking into infinity. And you know, things that seem really big in normal states of consciousness can seem really small. Like you can be holding spiral galaxies in your hands, which, you know, obviously your hand seems much smaller than a spiral galaxy. So like what's going on here in terms of perception is very, very different. So within the interplay of this energy and within the interplay of consciousness, making shape and form out of all of this, these entities can appear. And the entities, you know, can either be helpful or can just be neutral, or they can even be harmful. There are many different choices. And I like to think of it as that the energies just represent truly they are. So an apple is an apple, a banana is a banana, and that energetic shape is that thing. So if that energetic shape is the mother of ayahuasca, hallelujah, that's a beautiful thing. If that energetic shape is like some kind of gnome, dwarf, horned little creature, people see those all the time, like, okay. If the energy is anaconda, like, what is it doing? So I always ask people, I saw an entity, and I'm like, yeah, what did it do? Like, just what is it doing? How does it express itself? Right. So we get into ceremony, and people are filled with these things in their consciousness, not in their bodies. It's not like they're walking around stored in their cells, all these little like micro entity creatures. It's like somehow in the formation of consciousness, which we're barely tapping into and understanding yet, in this vast frontier, there's this like soup of shapes and energies. And they seem like they're astral, some seem like they're earth, some seem like they're straight up extraterrestrial, some seem like they're demonic, some seem like they're angelic. Well, funny enough, we have mythology for all of those things. Right. So somehow it's in our mind, somehow it's in our stories, somehow it's in our past, and we have history and historical reference to look at. So these things are just kind of like in there. And one of our jobs is to know how to interact and deal with them. And so when they show up, we have many different ways to be able to deal with these. And these are practices that have been handed down generation by generation for literally thousands of years. So you have to think, like, before there ever was a notion of Christianity, before there ever was a notion of Buddhism, there were people doing these ceremonies, understanding these quote unquote entities, dealing with them and interacting with them. There's a great story around this that I heard once, which was this guy comes out of this session, the ceremony, and he saw these like massive entities that are ringing the earth, and they're like giants, way bigger than the earth, and they're there, and they're warning the guy that they're going to come to earth and dominate the earth, right? These massive entities, and they go to the shaman guy and they say, tells him the story, and the shaman just kind of looks at him and laughs and goes, "Oh, are they still saying that?" Like, that's it. Like, really? Like, oh, let's keep continuing that story, right? So yes, these shapes, these entities, they come to the ceremonies, and then you have to know how to deal with them. And if you don't, that's what can be really dangerous about this, and why we always talk about safe and professional practice, because the management of this collective consciousness and these beings that are found within it is unbelievably important to the safety and security of everybody else. So one entity should not move from one person to another. Entities should always be removed from the ceremony itself. The nature of entities, if they're negative, people need to be protected from them, obviously in a variety of different ways. As you mentioned, Mapacho is one way to be able to create protections for people. Intention and invocation is a way. The energetic channeling and control within the room is another way. Using other kinds of entities to deal with entities is a very popular traditional Amazonian technique. So if these kinds of entities appear, you use these kinds of entities to move them, and it functions very much in just like a balance of power. If the entity doesn't want to be moved, you bring in an entity that's powerful enough to move that one. And then you find out that, really interesting, a lot of our psychosomatic and psychological illnesses are also intertwined with these beings. So one of the things that I thought was really amazing about learning how to heal people was that I would go up to them in ceremony, and you would see this, like I said, this field energy around them, and there would be like all these swarming, almost like bees, but these, like, you'd stop one thing, they're like swarming energies all around somebody. Look at them, and they'd be like these little, like, demonic gremlin-y looking things, maybe about the size of literally like a bee. And I would look at them, and all they would do is say negative things.
Oh, wow.
Like, just negative things about the person.
Wow.
All they did was broadcast unbelievable self-hating negatives talk. And that's literally all they did. And you just take the shakapa, which is a sleep rattle, it makes the shook sound, and you'd play it around the person's head until all those entities were gone. Right? And lo and behold, for the first time in the person's life, the negative self-talk would go away. The self-berating thinking would no longer be there anymore. The pain and suffering, the anxiety and depression that they felt around having this like voice that would just never stop in their head would be gone. And so I started to say, wow, there's actually a relationship and vision to these kinds of entities and a person's mindset and the way that they're thinking. And I thought that was like a fascinating discovery that, we made about 15, 20 years ago on how to actually be able to help people that have, what people would think of as like, typical Western psychological or psychosomatic illnesses. So I started to see in consciousness this intertwined reality between the entities and what people were actually experiencing. And I knew it was kind of beyond quote unquote normal, but again, we were tapping into this frontier called consciousness and seeing that inside it wasn't empty at all. And it wasn't just filled with thoughts, but it was also filled with these things called entities, or these like energetic shapes. And they had a profound effect on our mental health and well-being.